All right, so today we talk about program design. And there are many different ways to be designing your program, how you structure things, what exercise you include, rest, reps, set ranges, and so on. And based on your specific situation, all of this is going to change. So multiple options. In order to show you how it's done, I'm going to do a couple of different examples for a beginner, intermediate, and an advanced individual. And you're going to see the basic logic behind it, but keep in mind this is just an example. Things could be done in many different ways. So we're going to start off with the beginner lifter. And keep in mind the template that you see here, this is something that I've just done for this video. And there are things that I did beforehand. So basically I've organized everything. There are some formulas in there, some algorithms just to make my life easier. But you can easily replicate the same process using pen and paper. It's just that it's going to take you a little bit longer. And also if you're interested in acquiring this specific spreadsheet, keep in mind that I keep updating these, and some of the formulas they're not going to work once I update something, because some of the information here, some of the data is linked to a master sheet, and whenever I make changes there, they may not be reflected here. So if you need the spreadsheet, you can text me personally, but keep in mind probably it's not going to work for you because it's already going to be outdated. All right, starting off with the beginner workout. What you see here is the general layout, and I'm going to first take a look here on the right side. So we have some general recommendations for beginners. You can see the set recommendations, load, rep, and frequency ranges. So someone who has almost no experience, a complete newbie, or maybe you've been training for some time, general recommendations for sets are 6 to 10. Most of the times the weight is going to be very light. The main focus there is going to be on form and proper technique. Reps about 8 to 12, although you can certainly go outside of this range as long as you don't go lower than 6 and much higher than 15 on most reps. Frequency, how many times you train in a week, 3 to 4 works pretty well. 4 could be a little bit too much. You can certainly go to 5, but it's not very applicable for beginners. You're just going to end up with very short workouts. And here we have some additional information for a very specific person. So this way you can understand the logic, what other modifiers affect your program design. So we have things like training status. Here we have some very specific information that we're going to be working with. Let's say we have an individual who is just basically no experience. Maybe they've been in the gym a couple of times, but for the most part, they're a complete beginner. Stress level overall in their lifestyle, moderate, some occasional bursts here and there, but nothing too crazy. We also have their body composition, slightly overweight, activity levels, sanitary, and genetics, about average. So what all of this means and how it affects these recommendations here. Because as you know, we're working ranges, so 6 to 10 sets. However, how do we determine whether we do 6 or 10 or maybe somewhere in between like 8? Well, this additional information is going to help us decide this. So if you have little to no experience, basically the less experience you have, the closer you're going to be to the lower end, closer to 6 as opposed to 10. The more experience you have, probably more sets you can handle. Same goes for the weights and reps. Stress levels, the more stressed you are, the less you can handle in terms of volume. And the less stressed you are, the more happy overall nothing is fatiguing you, mentally fatiguing you, then the more you can handle. Body composition just essentially tells us whether you are trying to lose weight or gain weight. Dieting, trying to lose weight, by its nature, it's stressful. Meaning that if you're on a diet, especially if it's more of a severe diet, if you've been dieting for some time, you cannot handle as much work. So this here is going to be our volume. If you're dieting, your volume recommendation is going to, or at least you're going to be closer to the lower limit of those recommendations. Activity levels, essentially if you're someone who is more active, you're getting more fatigued, so you can get less work done in the gym. So we need to be a little bit more conservative with the amount of volume that we apply to the program. Genetics, essentially when you look at someone, you can usually tell whether they have good or bad genetics for what they're trying to do. It's not even good or bad, but how their genetics are going to affect their performance. So if you look at someone, they're like super big, wide frame, they look like they can wrestle a bear. Even if they've never been in the gym, you can probably guess, and you're probably going to be right, that that person can probably handle more volume than someone who, the wind blows and they just carries them away. They just don't look like someone who can handle a lot of work in the gym. So genetics is a bit of a subjective component, subjective modifier, but you can usually tell how this is going to affect your work capacity in the gym. So in this case, we have our normal individual, nothing too special, not hypermuscular without even training, not someone who's like a scrawny guy. So about an average body. All right, so how do we use this information? First off, we start with specificity, making sure that we're doing the right type of exercises. And you can see here I have those types of exercises. For the most part, we're going to be doing some pushing, pulling movements, legs, which means quads, hamstrings, and so on, with specific types of exercises. Highly recommend watching the module C before watching this video. So if you haven't covered that video that talks about the specific muscle groups, stop this, pause this video, and go watch the other one. Because otherwise, most of the stuff is not going to make a lot of sense, especially if you're not sure which exercises work which muscle groups. With this in mind, here we have our general outline. So since we have someone who is, based on the modifiers that we have here, we're going to say that they're probably somewhere more closer to the lower end as opposed to the maximum amount of volume that you can handle. So if the range is 6 to 10 sets and lightweight, they're probably we're going to start them off very, very easy, very, very light, meaning that probably we don't need to do 4 workouts. So let's start with 3 workouts. We're going to try to balance everything and just keep it super easy, low volume, based on the information that we have here. So the general structure that we're going to start with is we have 3 workouts, which means that the way we could structure things, this is again just an example. You can do it in many different ways, but what I choose to do now is have full body training. 2 days are going to be focused around training the upper body with a bit of lower body work, and then 1 day is going to be focused more on the lower body and then a bit of upper body as well. So the way we're going to do it, we have our exercise types of exercises here. So I'm just going to copy paste and basically try to build a program. I'm going to start off our training with a pushing exercise, which trains the pecs, the chest. Then we can add a pulling exercise that's going to train the back. So we have 1 pushing, 1 pulling. Let's do the opposite thing for session 3. So we're going to add a vertical pull exercise and a horizontal push exercise. So we're training the chest and the back this way. All right, and for legs, let's grab the quads. We want to also make sure that we're training quads on session A and session 1 and session 3. So we're going to have quads here, hamstrings. Let me just grab this thing here. I'm going to put them here. Okay, so we got the basics. We start with the main lifts, the compound lifts. And of course, obviously, we're also going to have a sort of a dedicated or a focused day for the legs, where we're going to include both quads and hamstrings. So all good. And looks like we can use a little bit more for the upper body. So let's put another, let's add a fly movement. So a fly movement also is going to train the pecs. So in this exercise, we got the chest covered. And here we want to add another pulling exercise that is going to be training the back. So let's add a horizontal pull. So what we did here with session 1, the logic is we have mostly upper body day, mostly focused on the chest. We have a pushing exercise and a fly exercise. And then we also train the back and the quads. Session 3 is kind of the opposite. Again, focus on the upper body, but this time the focus is on pulling exercises. We have a horizontal and a vertical pull. Let me see, vertical, yeah, horizontal. Focuses on the back, but we also have some legs. And here with the legs, obviously focuses on the legs. What else we can add here is we can add a bit of some isolation work. So we can add some upper body work. What are we missing? We have pulling, we have pushing, we have chest, we have back. We're missing shoulders. All right, let's add a shoulder exercise here. Whoops. I'm gonna grab this one and put it here. So far, so good. And here we may add an extra exercise. So let's add some abs. Okay, so this is just the general structure that we're working with. This could change, you can structure it in a different way, but let's see what we have here. So far looks pretty good. This is the specificity part, making sure that you're doing the right type of work. Now let's go about and see how the volume is going to work here. Let's say we're going to aim for about 7 to maybe 8 sets per muscle group. So for our chest, which is the pecs main muscle group there, let's say we have 3 sets here, and let's say we have 2 sets here, total of 5 so far. We have another chest exercise. Here we may do 3 sets. So we have 3 and 3, 6, and 2, 8. It's a little bit more than I wanted to do initially, but based on the structure of the program, this could work. Although we can actually do it like this. So we have 3 and 4. That's going to be about 7. Okay, let's do it like this. Then for the vertical pulling exercises, we're going to apply the exact same logic. So 2 here, 3, 2. And for our quads, again, we're going to aim for about 6 to 7. Actually, for the lower body, you can go a little bit lower because it's just a bigger muscle, and it takes a little bit longer to recover. So usually your lower body volume may be lower by 1 or 2 sets. So let's say for the legs, we want about an average of 6 sets per muscle group. So for our quads, let's go 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here. Right? This is total of 6. Shoulders, most of the shoulder volume is actually going to go from your pulling and pushing movement. So pushing and pulling generally trains the shoulders, and about 50 to 60% of the volume for those exercises is going to apply for your shoulders as well. So meaning that we don't need to actually have 3 or 7 sets for the shoulders. We can only just add, let's say, 2 sets. Again, because most of the muscle stimulation for that muscle group is going to come from the pushing and pulling movement, about 60 to 70%. So we only need to do just a couple of sets. And then for abs, let's say 1 to 2. All right, this is just for beginner who doesn't have a lot of experience. Total that we're aiming here, based on our modifiers, is going to be about 6 to 7 sets. If this is too easy, you can always add an extra set here and there. So let's say you can just easily change this to 3 sets, 3 sets. And here for the legs, let's say 4, 4. It's pretty simple changes. Better start off a little bit lighter, because you can always make things harder, as opposed to being a little bit too optimistic, making the program very hard, and then having to adjust, having to do a deload, or having to take a light session and do a bit of a damage control there. So that's a general structure. You can shift things around. And one thing that I want to point out that you probably are already asking yourself, so we have a bunch of different exercises. Why are we not doing any calf exercises, any glute exercises, any biceps, triceps, or more shoulders? Well, this is a beginner, meaning that most of the pulling, actually all of the pulling and pushing exercises are going to be training your arms. So you're already training your biceps and your triceps, and most of the leg exercises are going to be training your calves. So you don't really need to do a ton of volume. You're already going to get pretty good muscle stimulation, and at the same time, due to these modifiers here, you don't have someone who have good recovery. Right? They have some stress in their life, they have almost no training experience, so probably they have a hard time recovering, at least in the beginning. Obviously, over time, their recovery is going to improve rapidly. But initially, if you add too much stuff in their program, they're going to have a hard time recovering. And this program is mostly for a complete beginner. If you have a little bit more experience, then you can throw in some extra arm and, let's say, calf exercises if you want to do forearm and so on. But it really depends on how much you can handle at any given time. All right. Then next, we have the volume calculated. So how we're progressing, how we're managing fatigue. What we could do is for a beginner, you can progress for a very long period of time without having to worry about a deload, taking it easy, simply because your threshold, how much volume you can handle over time, improves very rapidly. Meaning that you can run this exact same program for about a couple of months, even longer, without any issues. So let me show you what we got here. So we can run this program for multiple weeks, no changes there. And then at the end of, let's say, the second month, you can do a deload. A deload phase is you just bring down the volume, and essentially this means doing less sets. You can do less reps or just lower the weight. It's up to you. But again, like, you can progress for a very long period of time. One thing that we forgot to mention, this is the rep ranges. So again, this is relevant to volume. For a beginner, you can go, let me see, we have reps 8 to 12. Let's say our rep range is going to be 7 to 10. All right, why 7 to 10? Well, I don't want to be doing more than, at least for a beginner, I don't want to have him do more than 10 reps, simply because the more reps you do, the more fatigue you become, and it's very hard to pick up new technique. So that's an issue for new people who don't have a lot of experience in the gym. The more reps you do, the harder it is to learn technique past a certain point. Obviously, if you're only doing like just 2 reps, it's even harder to learn technique because you have less repetition. But the sweet spot seems to be about 10-ish reps. So that's why we're going to go 7 to 10. Why 7, not what 8, depending on our rep range here, optimal rep range. Simply because it's going to give you a little bit more flexibility. Instead of 8 to 10, there's just 2 rep difference. This way you have a little bit more of a leeway in terms of progression, in terms of the reps. And we can do the exact same rep range for every single, whoops, I'm not sure how this happened, for every single exercise. As a beginner, you don't need a ton of variety. You can be growing from almost anything that you are doing. So just focus on technique. Make sure that you keep your reps low, but not too low. And your sets, they don't need to change. Everything remains the same. You can progress for a very long period of time. That was super easy. Beginners, very easy to do it. The more you progress, you just add in an extra set here and there, and you're good. So your next training cycle, you can just bump up the number of sets. As for the exercises, well, we can get very specific with those ones, but check module C that talks about the different muscle groups. So here I'm not going to select specific exercises because this video is going to get super long. What about an intermediate lifter? All right, what's the situation here? We have the general recommendations. As you can see, everything has increased. More sets, heavier weights, rep ranges also have increased slightly. And the frequency, obviously, the more volume you're doing, the more sets you're doing, the more frequently you could be training, simply because you have to spread that volume throughout multiple different days. And at the same time, you generally recover faster in between sessions, so you can train more often. Once you've recovered, you can train again. You don't want to be waiting too long, because there's going to be a gap where you could potentially be building more muscle, but you're not, simply because you're not training. You're not providing the stimulus for muscle growth. So you can be training more frequently. Okay, this is not a beginner. Let's just fix this. Intermediate. And I believe we have to fix it here. Yeah. Advanced. Going back here. Here, let's look at our modifiers and see how we're going to use them. We have training status, obviously someone who's experienced. This is by definition. We have an intermediate lifter. If you're not training, that's an important thing to remember. If you're not training, you're a beginner. Even if you've been training consistently for a decade and then you stop training for 2 years, you come back to the gym, treat yourself as a beginner. Obviously, more of an quote-unquote an advanced beginner, because you already know technique, you already know how to do the exercises, so you can go a little bit more aggressive in terms of these general recommendations. You can just aim for the higher end because you're just more experienced, you know what to do in the gym. The learning curve, you don't have to worry about this. But here with this modifier, I mean, it's by definition explained by your situation. If you're intermediate, if you've been training for some time, several months, couple of years, actually to be an intermediate, probably at least 7+ months, then you already have some experience, you've been training for a while. Stress levels, in this case, let's say that we have someone who just has no stress, all good. That's our problem. Body composition, someone who is overweight, So here we have someone who is slightly overweight. Here we have someone who is, well, legit overweight, meaning that they're probably doing a longer diet and more of an aggressive type of a diet. So that's also going to affect their recovery. The activity levels, we have someone who is very active and also is doing twice a week CrossFit. Okay. This is definitely something we need to take into account. Genetics below average, meaning that we have someone who simply, like, look at them, you're more on the skin, well, they're overweight and have below average genetics, which is usually not something that you see in real life. But let's just say that we have someone who is skinny fat. He's not very strong, doesn't have a large frame, but just have a massive belly and tiny arms. So essentially not the best situation there. You're overweight and at the same time you cannot handle that much volume in the gym. You just look at their frame, you can sort of guess this. All right, how do we use this information? So some experience, and this is already good, doesn't really help us that much, but essentially means that we're going to be working with these recommendations here. No stress, that's good. It means that you can recover faster. I mean, stress is not going to impair your recovery levels. However, the fact that you're on a diet, definitely something you need to account for. You can't really be very aggressive with your volume. And at the same time, if you're active and you're engaging in some other type of sport, especially CrossFit, which is not easy, your recovery is split between two different types of activities, meaning that you can't really handle that much. And your gym training is going to take a hit, and you really need to keep your training low. Otherwise, you're going to reach your threshold very fast. You're going to get too beat up, and you're not going to be able to progress. And also, to top it off, we also have below average genetics. That's not great. And we have an overall not a great situation, although low stress levels is something that we have at least positive that's going good for us. All right, with all this, how we're going to structure our program. Let's say we can go 3 to 5 workouts. Let's say we go for 4 workouts, just so it's a little bit different than what we had here. Although ideally, if you're doing CrossFit, 4 times training in the gym, like normal strength bodybuilder type of training, and 2 CrossFit sessions, that's 6 training sessions a week, which is too much. But just so you get a bit of a variety in terms of a 3 versus a 4-day split, we're going to do a 4-day split. In practical, in the real world, probably a 3-day split is going to be a better decision. All right, so the way we can design this, we have 4 days. Let's do a upper lower body split. We're going to use slightly the similar logic, which means 1 day is going to be focused on pushing. 1 upper day is going to be focused on pushing. 1 lower day is going to be focused on the pulling movements. And for the legs, we're going to have a similar logic. So 1 day is going to be focused on quads. 1 day is going to be focused on hamstrings. Let's start with, just take a quick look here. We start with pushing movements. Let's start with pulling movements. So we're going to have 1 pulling movement. And let's say for this individual, we're going to be aiming to do about 10 to maybe 12. 12 sets is going to be too much since you're doing CrossFit. So let's say about 10 sets on average. This means that we're going to have about 3 exercises per muscle group, assuming that each exercise has 3 sets. So that's going to be roughly 3 exercises per muscle group. So here what we can do is have 1 vertical pulling movement. Let's say we add 1 horizontal pulling movement. And now we're going to add 1 pushing movement. So this is going to be for the chest. For session 3, reverse logic. Let's say 1 pushing movement, 1 flying movement. Again, the first 2 exercises, they're training the chest. The last exercise, let's see, it's going to train the back. All right, so far, so good. Then let's see what we can do for the quads. Say 1, 2, and here I'm gonna start adding some hamstrings. These are the major muscle groups. You have your chest, your back, your quads, your hamstrings. We also need to add some shoulders, but let's just give it a quick overview just to see how it's shaping out, the overall structure. Okay, so we're missing something, and yes. Let's start adding the sets and just see how much volume we're getting. Let's say for our pulling movements, or basically for the back, let's say we do it like this: 2, 3, and 3. That's gonna be 8, 9. Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. We wanna aim for about 10 sets for the upper body and let's say 9 sets for the lower body. As you can see, we're very close to the lower end, which is 8 is the minimum. It's a range. You can definitely go a little bit lower, a little bit higher, especially since there's more than beginner, intermediate, and advanced. There's also intermediate stages in between those main stages. So as you're moving, you may be finding yourself that you're sort of slightly in the middle between those. So here we have someone who's technically an intermediate, but simply because his recovery is not great, he's engaged in other sport. We're going to treat you more like a beginner, slightly more advanced beginner. So let's do 10 sets for the upper body, 9 sets for the lower body. Let's do the numbers now. So let's start with our pulling back. We have 3 and 4, that's 7. We need 3 more. And for our last back exercise, 3 sets. For the chest, we're going to use the opposite logic. So let's 3 and 4. So we have 7 and 3 here, 10. Okay. Upper body, major muscle groups, all good. For the lower body, we're going to do just 3 sets per exercise because we're going to go for a total of 9 instead of 10. Again, the lower body recovers slightly slower, hence you can't really handle that much volume. So usually it's going to be off by a couple of sets. We've got 3 here, 6, and another 3 here, 9. Same deal for the hamstrings. All right, that takes care of the major muscle groups. What about some of the smaller muscle groups? We've got shoulders, we got also calves, abs, and so on. Well, recovery here is not great, and we're also doing CrossFit, which means that CrossFit is not the ideal way to build a muscle, but it also stimulates muscle growth. So technically, you don't need to do a lot of work during your bodybuilder style workout. So this is what we have here. So we're going to skip the isolation work. We're going to skip all of the direct arm work and all of the direct, maybe we can add some shoulders. Let's add some shoulders, something easy. I'm going to add shoulders in here. And let's say shoulders in here. We're going to have one hard shoulder exercise, which could be, let's say, a dumbbell press. Let's see. And here we can have one easy shoulder exercise, let's say a 2-arm lateral raise. Right, this one is definitely harder. And that's pretty much it for the upper body. Just a quick note about the general structure. So as you can see here, we had one chest exercise, one back exercise, one chest exercise. Here we have back, chest, or chest, back. It's a different way to structure the exercises. As a beginner, you don't really need to worry about warming up. So even if you have more of a random, you just throw in some legs in there and then you do some shoulders and then you do some back. It doesn't really matter. You don't really need to warm up. Your warm-ups before training different muscle groups are not going to be something that's really going to limit you. But in this case, you want to have a bit of a structure simply because if you were training back, then going in a random order, you may need to warm up before different exercises. But if you keep it a little bit more consistent and you're stacking together similar exercises, then you can just keep up their warm-up. So you have a back exercise, another back exercise, okay, looks a little bit better, and then you have a pushing exercise, and then you have a dumbbell press. So a dumbbell press, it's still a pushing exercise, though it's a vertical pushing exercise. So these are more similar exercises grouped together. So once you warm up for this exercise, you're good for this one. And once you warm up for this exercise, you're good for this one. Same for the quads. Once you warm up for this one, you're good for this one. In terms of the specific exercises, I'm actually going to select few here just to show you what I have in mind. So we want to have one easy pushing exercise and one a little bit harder pushing exercise. Same thing goes for the other muscle groups. So for the vertical pull exercise, let's go with a pull-up. Then one that it's easier, let's go for one arm dumbbell row. It's not going to be that easy. Let's say go incline to arm row, just because you have a support. Incline means that you're using a bench, so it's a little bit easier. Pushing exercise, let's go with a incline barbell bench press. Okay, this is good. squat exercise, we're going to have one heavy compound, let's say a barbell squat, and then just to make it easy, we can add a machine. We can have a leg press, or if you want to make it even easier, we can add a leg extension. A similar thing you can do for the hamstrings. We can have a good morning, and then let's say a hip extension. And then here we can have, let's say, a leg press. So kind of like in the middle. So a leg press is not as heavy and as hard as a free weight barbell squat, but it's still not as easy as doing a leg extension machine. So the way you can structure your exercises is you can pick one that is like compound, very heavy, very hard, and the same would be reflected in the rep ranges. So we're having a hard pull-up, especially if you're not good at pull-ups. The rep range is probably going to be lower simply because you cannot handle that many reps. But on the next exercise, it's a little bit easier, so you can go a little bit higher in terms of the reps. So let's say 10 to 14. Incline barbell bench press, you can decide how to go about this. It's more of a compound exercise, but let's say if you already have your normal bench press that is 7 to 10 reps, you want to have a little bit more variety because you are someone who is intermediate. Then if this is 7 to 10, this is a pretty similar exercise, so let's run a different rep range for this one. And then for the fly, you can go even higher. Let's say you go 12 to 16. The easier the exercise, the more isolation-like the exercise is, the heavier in terms of the reps. And of course, this means that you're going to be using lighter weights as well. So here again, we can have even, let's say, 6 to 8. Leg extension, super easy. Let's go 12 to 16. And then for the leg press, somewhere in the middle, let's say 8 to 14, something like this. All right, here we have a little bit more variety. And as you see, we really need to take into account all this information here, all these modifiers. For the leg sessions, they may be a little bit too short. So if you want to add something extra, you can add some ab exercises just to make sure that you're doing 4 exercises per session. So it's the same for everyone. But even if you just want to keep it like this, that's fine. If there was this, you didn't have this CrossFit session here, and you had someone who was bulking, who had like average genetics, you can easily fill up the gaps here and add, let's say here we can add a bicep exercise. And here you can add a tricep exercise. Actually, the way I would do it is I would switch these two so that you do triceps and then you do the lat raise, simply because the lat raise is easier than the tricep exercise. Here I would keep it like this because the shoulder press is actually harder than the bicep exercise. So the hardest exercise, the most technical exercise, you want to keep them first, and then the easiest stuff you want to keep it as last. This is a general recommendations. In some cases, it makes sense to do it the other way around, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And here you can add some calf work. All fine. All right, that was the intermediate workout example. As you see here, we have a lot more variety, many different ways you can structure and move things around, but it's still the same logic. Let's have someone who is an advanced individual. Yeah, things get like really interesting. Sets, oh man, you can go 12 plus. On some muscle groups, you can go very low. On some muscle groups, you can go very high, all the way up to 20, even 20 plus. Oh, one thing that we forgot about the intermediate. So in this case, how you're progressing, it's going to be fairly, not this one. It's going to be fairly similar to what you're doing as a beginner. The difference is that your training cycle is going to be shorter simply because you need to take a deload sooner. Your fatigue accumulates much faster. You're stronger. You're working with more volume. Hence, your fatigue accumulates much faster. But it's still the same logic. It's just that your training cycle is probably going to last about a month, maybe a little bit longer, but generally about 5 to 6 weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And the last one is going to be your deload, in which case you can just lower the number of sets and maybe lower the weights as well, do less reps, whatever you decide to do. There's also other ways you can do a more of a reactive deload where you only deload specific exercises. So instead of having a whole deload, if you find that your bench press performance is just starting to take a hit, but the rest of the muscle groups are fine. You can keep on progressing. In this case, just deload your bench press. So volume, so weight here, let's say we'll have the weight of what you did the previous week. Here you did, let's say 100 pounds, bench press 100 pounds. Yeah, anyway. Here you're gonna do 50 just to take it easy, and instead of doing 4 sets, you're gonna do 2 sets. So you just take it easy. And then next week, let's say this is not a deload, you go back to 4 sets, 100 pounds, and you reset the whole thing. So it's kind of like just a deload for that specific exercise that you're doing, not for all the exercises and everything. Advanced individual. All right. Here you can see the recommendations. If you have to pause the video, look at them, but they've been also explained in some of the previous lectures. What modifiers we have here? We have someone who is very experienced. Duh, he's advanced, makes sense. Stress levels, some stress there, nothing too crazy. Body composition, lean and muscular, which tells us that this guy is probably trying to build muscle, he's probably bulking, more food, better recovery. Then we have our activity levels. All right, so something here that he's going to be very active. Doesn't mean that he's engaged in other different sports, it's just that he's a little bit more active. This is going to sort of limit his recovery because he has to recover from the other stuff, whatever that stuff is. But then we have someone who has above average genetics. You look at them, they're huge, they're like a beast there, they're walking around. You can tell like this guy was big even before getting into the gym. So he can probably handle a lot of stuff. All right, very good situation here. Frequency of training, let's say 4 to 6 workouts. Again, like the more advanced you are, the more frequently you have to train, simply because you recover between sessions much faster and the anabolic window tends to last shorter. So you just need to keep making sure that you stay in the anabolic window by adding more, by keeping up the stimulation. Let's see what we have planned here. Okay, so we're going to go with 5 sessions. You can certainly go for 6 sessions, 4 sessions for an advanced individual who has to do a ton of volume. It is possible, but your sessions are going to end up way too long simply because you're trying to cramp up a lot of volume within just 4 sessions. So more per session. Let's go with 5. 6 is a little bit, again, too extreme for an advanced individual, although in this case, for this specific person that we have in mind, probably a good idea. What's the logic here? So we have 5 sessions, how we're going to split our exercises. The way we can do it is 3 upper body sessions and 2 lower body sessions. Again, the lower body, you're probably going to do a little bit less volume, but you can also do 2 dedicated upper, 2 dedicated lower, and the 5th session could be a bit of a mix and match. Whatever's left over, we all just put it there, regardless of whether it's upper body, lower body, isolation compound, whatever. So let's start building our structure. You're going to start off with, let's say, we started with back exercise. Okay, let's start with a pushing exercise. So we have our horizontal pull. I'm going to do it twice. So something that you may notice here, I'm doing 2 chest exercises. Both of them are going to be heavy compounds. We're not going to do one heavy compound and one flying movement, which is an isolation exercise. This is because this guy is big, he's advanced, he can handle a ton, he can handle 2 compound exercises. Then next, let's add a vertical pull. You know what? Let's do a horizontal pulling exercise. I'm going to make it really hard for this guy. And then for our other upper body session, and we're going to do the opposite thing. I'm going to grab a pulling exercise, 2 back exercises, and let's add let's add a fly here. Okay, that takes care of the 2 main upper and lower body body sessions. Let's do the lower body. Since we're going to have 2 dedicated sessions, we can have 1 compound quad exercise, 1 isolation quad exercise. I'm going to do the same. Let me see how I'm structuring things. You know what? I actually don't like the way this has been structured, so I'm going to move it around. Oops. Sorry, this could be a little bit too confusing, but just want to keep it a little bit more organized. Session 1 and session 2 are going to be our dedicated upper body sessions. Session 3 is going to be our first lower body session. And then our second lower body session is going to be session 5. Let's quads here, and we need hamstrings. Let's grab them from here. Bow, bow. Okay. So we have our first 2 upper body sessions, which are one is focused on the chest, one is focused on the back. Then we have a quad session and well, actually there's an even split between. This looks weird. Okay, I've realized what I did here. See, this is actually how I'm not gonna delete this from the video. I'm not gonna cut this from the video, just so you can see what's the logic behind building a program. Like sometimes you start working on a program and you realize, wait, what? This doesn't make sense. Like I have to change it around. This exercise doesn't belong here. And sometimes it takes a while to build a program, especially when you have a lot of information to consider. So this is normal part of the process. Like you're gonna be adding stuff, then you're gonna be removing it, then you're gonna add it back, and it's gonna take some time to build a workout. So we have 2 upper body sessions, 1 lower body. This is gonna be our mix session, which we're gonna leave for last, and then we have our second lower body session. So let's see what else we need. Let's take a quick look at the information here, and I'm gonna add a second modifier, and one last modifier, sorry. Let's say that this guy wants to reduce chest volume simply because he has crazy big chest, like genetics, big chest, and he wants to really focus on arms. All right, I'm gonna use this information here to make additional changes, and this is what we're gonna do in this session here, which is gonna be the mix and match. Everything that we need to add extra, we're gonna add it here. So what is gonna be our target? We have 12 plus. Let's say he's advanced, we can handle on average about 18 sets. All right, for most muscle groups, the 18, this is gonna be our baseline. For the legs, we're gonna go a little bit lower, let's say 16. And for the chest, we can also go a bit lower, again 16, simply because he wants to have less chest volume. He doesn't want to focus that much on the chest. He's fine with just maintaining the size. And we're gonna add a little bit more volume for the arms. We can go all the way up to 20 sets. Now let's start calculating the sets and see what we got so far. Let's say that we did for the chest, these are pushing exercises. We have 4 sets here, and then we have some more. What was it? Flies. Okay, for the flies, let's say we do 5. And you know what? Here we can do 5 again. So a bit of a different approach, but so far we have 5 here, 10, 14. Our goal is 16. So we're definitely short with 2 sets. So the way we can do this is, instead of having only 3 exercises and trying to do a ton of sets, so we can here we do 6 and here we can do 5. Actually this could work, but it's gonna be too crazy. 10 sets, we're pushing 2 heavy pushing exercises, probably a bad idea. So let's go like this, 3, 4. Here we can keep it 5. So this is going to be 3 and 4, 7 and 5. I'm bad at math, so that's why I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do it like this. We have 12 so far. So we can add an extra exercise that's going to train the chest for another 4 reps. You know what? Session 4. This is where we can put this. Let's add another horizontal push exercise. Since we don't want to focus on the chest, I'm going to actually add it somewhere here as a second exercise. And we're missing 4 sets. All right, total of 16 so far. 4 and 4, 8, and then we have 8 and 8. Okay, we're good. For the back, we need a total of 18. That's our target. Let's say we do 5 here. We do 4 and 5, a little bit more. Bit of more of a crazy approach. This could be an overkill for some people, but this guy, he can handle it. So we have 5 and 5, 14. And we need another 4 to make it to 18. All right, all good. Let's grab a pulling exercise, a back exercise, put it here. We're gonna do 4 sets. Oops. We're good. All right, So what about some of the extra stuff? What about the shoulders? Well, for the shoulders, we know that 60 to maybe 75% of the volume is going to come from our pushing and pulling movements. So if we're aiming for 18, you know what? Even for the shoulders, let's say this guy wants to focus on arms and shoulders. So our goal is going to be 20 sets. We can assume that we already did about 10 sets from our pushing and pulling exercises. So basically for the shoulders, we already did 10 sets with the rest of the upper body work. So we only need to add extra 8 sets. Is my math right? 8 to 10, depending on how you count the volume. So let's add 2 more exercises for the shoulders, and we can have them each be about 5 sets. I'm gonna grab a shoulder exercise. Let's put one here, and we can put another one. Actually, you know what we could do? We can have a ton of shoulders, because the shoulders recover very quickly, so you can train them a little bit more often. And we can add shoulders everywhere. Let's see. So we have shoulders in both our dedicated upper and lower sessions, and we can also add shoulders to the mix and match fourth session, which is going to be a combination of all kinds of different exercises. And we can have everywhere. We need about 10 more sets. Let's have 3 sets here, 3 here, and 3 here. This is 9, but technically, I mean, you can be pretty flexible with the volume. We can experiment. And here, if you want to, you can do it 4, just to add it to 10. So here for the shoulders, we want to keep it easy because these are all hard exercises. Let's see, here we have a bench press, then we have a flat dumbbell bench press. Here we have a horizontal pull. Let's see, a barbell row. These are all hard exercises. Here we don't really want to add another very hard exercise like an overhead press. That's going to be super tough. Let's add something easy. Let's add a butterfly lateral raises. That's a hard one to say. And here another easy shoulder exercise. Upright row, cable, super easy to implement. And here we can have a chin up, pulling exercise, a 1-arm dumbbell row, and a fly exercise. It's going to be pec deck fly machine. Or, no, you know what? A little bit harder. Cable fly. Bam. That's it. 2 easy shoulder exercises here. And down here, we're going to have one hard exercise, which is going to be barbell shoulder press. And for our vertical, we're going to have a standard pull-up with a incline dumbbell press. And most of the upper body is taken care of. What else we can add? Well, let's add some arms. This guy wants to focus on arms. With arms, most of the pulling movements, the volume that you're doing for pulling and pushing movements, almost all of it transferred to arm training directly. There are a couple of exceptions where this is not the case, but if we assume that we're doing already about 16 to 18 sets for our chest and for our back, if we want to get to about 20 total for the arms, we only need to add an extra exercise for 2 or 3 sets. Right? Because you already get about 18 sets from the, let's say, back and chest exercises. So add 2 more, or 3 more, and you get to about 20 sets for the arms. This is our focus here. Let's add I'm going to grab a bicep exercise. Let's see where it makes the most sense to put it. We can put it here. I'm actually going to do it like this. I want to keep them consistent. I'm going to delete this. And let's fix color here. I'm going to explain why I did it. So see, we have a barbell row, then we have bicep exercise, then we have the lateral raise. Why like this? Well, the barbell row is already going to warm up your biceps. So whenever you switch from a barbell row to a bicep exercise, you don't need to warm up the biceps. All taken care of. So that's why I moved the lateral raises below as the last exercise. And this session, 5 exercises, let's say 3 sets, solid stuff. I mean, that's a total of, let me just see how many sets for the whole session. Man, that's 18 sets. That's going to be a long, hard session. We're good. If you want to hear, if you have the time, like if this guy can take it, you can add some apps, but that's a bit of an extra. Although with good genetics, you can probably handle a little bit more. But yeah, that's our session 1 complete. Let's complete session number 2. Here we're gonna add some triceps. In this case, the triceps, we can actually add them last, because see, the cable fly doesn't actually train the triceps. It trains the biceps, like funny enough. And even though it's a chest exercise, it's one of those chest exercises that doesn't train the triceps. So here we can keep the upright row as it is. And even if you consider that the fly, it does stimulate a bit of the biceps, so it's going to warm up your biceps. And the upright row, you may also get some bicep engagement, so you're already warmed up, you have nothing to worry. So in this case, keeping the shoulder exercise here and adding the tricep exercise as the last one makes more sense. And we can even, let's keep it 3 sets again, because the triceps is actually a bigger muscle compared to the biceps. So even though you're getting a little bit less tricep stimulation because you're doing less chest, you also have the fly in there, it's sort of a balanced out act there, even though you want to do more triceps, simply because the triceps is a bigger muscle, so overall the volume recommendations for the triceps are slightly lower by a couple of reps compared to the bicep. The bicep can handle more, smaller muscle can recover faster. All right, sessions 1, session 2, already taken care of. Let me just delete this. What about session 3? You have quads. We are aiming for, let me remember, we're going to aim for about 16 reps for the legs. Bigger muscle, we're going to have lower in terms of volume. Let's say we have 4 sets, and here we have 4, 4. It's going to be 4 and 4, 8, and 4, 4, 4. 8 and 8 is 16. But to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm actually going to do it like this. Because the way we want to structure our exercises, let's say we have a heavy compound, we want to follow up with an isolation exercise. That's going to be so many exercises. And leg press. Simply because on the squat, you're going to get too beat up. However, the leg press is easy, so that's why we can sort of shift the sets and do more on the leg extension. But here, if you have to do a leg press, then I would rather keep it 4 and 4. It would make more sense. Because on the leg press, you're not going to be able to handle 5 sets. You can, but it's a little bit trickier. So that's why let's, just so you can see how you can structure things differently and can calculate your sets based on the exact type of exercise that you're doing. For the hamstrings, let's have not a good morning. So Romanian deadlift and a hip extension. I really like this one, 4 and 4. And here we can do it, let's say 3 and 5. And we're gonna do a stiff leg deadlift with barbell. It's gonna get you super beat up. And we can have a leg curl. All right, and that's gonna be for our dedicated lower body session. And here, could you add some isolation work? Well, let's add some abs in there. You know what? Why not? Bam and bam. You can add calves as well, depending on how you want to structure things. But I just wanted to add the calves here in session 4. So session 4, we already have a bunch of upper body work. So we have some pulling, some back movements, some shoulder movements, some movements for the chest. And then let's add some calf exercises. You know what? I'm going to add some calves and let's say some glute isolation work. Let's say this guy really wants to focus on his legs. Not his legs, but on his glutes. So he wants to focus on the arms, shoulders, and glutes. And we can do a glute bridge for the calf raises. Let's go standing machine calf raise. Let's go 3 and 3. Although here I can go 5 if you want to. You just need to see what makes the most sense. All right, this is just an example. As you see, you can tweak things like crazy. You can go for 4, 5, 6, 7 workouts a week. This is something that nobody does. Don't do it. You're gonna die. You need your rest time. But that's basically it for more of an advanced individual. You see a lot more flexibility. In this case, you get to play around with many different types of exercises. and you can shift around things a lot more simply because you have more sets. That volume could be spread over in different combinations. One last thing, this information here, what I'm doing here, it's mostly based on guesswork. But if you have an actual advanced individual, so if you're creating a program for yourself, you've been training for a while, you don't need to do all the guesswork here. So you see, I've been trying to tweak the sets. I've been doing some guessing, like would it make sense to have it three here and 4 here, or would I do 4 workouts or 5 workouts? If you're an advanced individual, you already have your baseline. You don't really need to calculate your sets. You already have this data. So you only need to take the data and apply it in a different structure, but you already have that information in terms of how many sets you're doing. Here, I've calculated the training recommendations, the set recommendations based on the information here. But if you're training already, you already know how many sets you're doing, so you only need to restructure your exercises. Rep ranges here is going to be wildly crazy. Let's say on some you can do 6 to 8. Here we can do 10 to 12. Here, let's say for some reason you want to be doing something crazy like this, bicep exercise. God knows what you're doing here. Again, like you can be a little bit, you have more flexibility in terms of the rep ranges and in terms of everything when you're more advanced. In terms of progressions, actually I'm not going to even try to give you a specific example because there's many different ways you can do this. Just keep in mind that as an advanced individual, your workout cycles are going to be probably shorter. In this case, you may run, not this one, I want to delete it. You may run a cycle that is only 4 weeks short, well technically 5 if you count in the deload, or it may be even shorter, only like 3 weeks, depending on what you're trying to do. Like with advanced individuals, stronger, more volume, you need to recover more frequently. And there's different ways you can be progressing. You can actually be having different sets for the different weeks, so you can even progress in terms of the sets. Let's say you can go no, it's gonna be 3. 3 again, 3, 2. As you can see, you're not only progressing in terms of the weights, but you're also progressing in terms of the sets, and it gets like wildly complicated depending on what you're trying to achieve. In certain situations, you have to do this. Check the lecture that is about overload. It explains why advanced individuals have to do things differently. In certain situations, just a linear progression is too much, and in some situations, you just need to add more variety for the sake of having variety. So not only progressing in terms of the weight, but also in terms of the sets. But if you do this, you may also need to work with things like reps in reserve. That's the acronym, reps in reserve. So here you may start with 4 reps in the tank. Here, move into 3 reps in the tank, meaning that every week you're actually pushing closer to failure, and technically you're making things harder. So your sets are changing, your weights are changing, your reps are probably changing, how close to failure you're getting. Basically, the reps from failure is going to affect your weights and your reps, because if you're pushing closer to failure, you're doing more reps or you're using heavier weights. So a bunch of different components that are all changing at the same time. Super crazy. Not going to go into the details, but when you get there, there's a lot of information online. There's a lot of things you can try. As long as you're managing fatigue and volume, you're going to be doing a good job. Again, check the previous lectures. All right, that's it for today. It was a long one. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, just hit me up on, well, wherever you want to hit me up. Cheers.